Vincenzo's on a Wednesday night smelled like basil and expensive wine. I'd worked here long enough, 2 years this November, to know the rhythm of the place like my own heartbeat. The way candlelight caught on crystal glasses, the murmur of conversations that never quite rose above the jazz playing through hidden speakers, the weight of white linen napkins folded into perfect triangles. I preferred it this way. Quiet. Predictable. A place where I could move through my shift like water, noticed only when necessary. "Table 12 needs refills," Vanessa said as I passed the bar, her dark hair pulled into the severe bun management required. She'd been my anchor since I started here, the kind of friend who could read my mood from across a crowded room. On it. I wove between tables, smile fixed in place, the kind that said professional but not personal. It was a skill I'd perfected over months of practice, being present without actually being seen. The couple at table 12 barely glanced up as I poured water into their glasses, too absorbed in whatever anniversary or business deal had brought them to Chicago's South Side on a weeknight. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I didn't need to check it to know who it was. Tyler had called 47 times in the past week. 47. I'd counted because after the 30th, the number stopped feeling real and started feeling like evidence. Weeks blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected, the city turning pages for them while they learned how to breathe in the same sentence. 3 months since I'd ended it. 3 months of freedom that felt less like liberation and more like waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You okay?" Vanessa caught me on my next pass. Those sharp brown eyes missing nothing. "Fine." "That's the 3rd time you've checked your phone in an hour." Tyler found out where I work. Her expression hardened. "He came here?" "Not yet. But he's calling the restaurant line now. Left 6 messages with the hostess yesterday. Liv, you need to get a restraining order." I busied myself organizing menus that didn't need organizing. It's not that simple. It literally is that simple. You go to the police, you tell them your ex-boyfriend won't leave you alone. He hasn't actually done anything. Not technically. The words tasted like defeat. He just calls, shows up places. It's not illegal to exist in the same city. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, then closed it as a customer approached the bar. We'd have this conversation again. We always did. And every time, I'd find new reasons why going to the police felt like escalation, like poking a sleeping animal and hoping it didn't wake up angry. Tyler and I had been together for 2 years. In the beginning, it felt like drowning in attention. Flowers sent to work, surprise visits, texts checking in throughout the day. I'd mistaken intensity for devotion. By the time I realized the flowers came with questions about who I'd spoken to, the surprise visits were actually surveillance, and the check-in texts were demands for my location. I was already isolated. He'd carefully, methodically separated me from friends who didn't understand our connection. Made me quit the study group for my online design courses because those people are just distractions from us. The design courses. I'd started them 3 years ago, back when I still believed I'd escape waitressing and build something of my own. A studio, maybe. Freelance work that let me create instead of just serve. Now I studied in the early morning hours after shifts, fighting exhaustion, accumulating knowledge I had no energy to use. "Order up for your section," Marco called from the kitchen window. I delivered pasta to a family of 4, cleared plates from a business dinner, refilled wine glasses for a couple who looked too comfortable together to be married to each other. The routine was meditative, mindless in the way that let my thoughts spiral without actually having to feel them. Until I felt it, that prickle of awareness that came from being watched. He sat at the bar like he always did. Same stool, 3rd from the left, positioned where he could see both the entrance and the dining room. Dominic Lombardi had been coming to Vincenzo's 3 times a week for 6 months. Always ordered the ossobuco. Always left a tip that was generous without being flashy. Always arrived with men who wore suits that fit too well and watched the room with the same calculated attention their boss did. I'd noticed him the first week back in April. Hard not to. He was the kind of handsome that made you look twice. Dark wavy hair that curled slightly at his collar, olive skin, a jawline sharp enough to cut. But it was his eyes that caught me. Deep brown, almost black in the low light, and always observing. He observed me. Not in the way men usually did, with that sliding assessment that made my skin crawl. This was different. Focused. Like he was cataloging information, storing it away for later use. I'd seen him do it with other staff too, tracking patterns, noting details. The owner greeted him by name, gave him the best table even when the bar was what he wanted, never rushed him no matter how long he lingered. I suspected what he was, what he had to be with that kind of deference, that caliber of companion. But suspecting and knowing were different countries, and I had no intention of crossing that border. Olivia. His voice carried across the dining room, low and accented in a way I couldn't place. Italian, probably, given the restaurant's clientele and his name. I approached the bar, order pad ready, even though he never ordered anything beyond his usual. Mr. Lombardi. Can I get you anything else? The check, please. Of course. I'll have Vanessa. From you. Not aggressive. Not demanding. Just stated as fact. Vanessa stood 3 feet away, closer to the register, already reaching for the bill folder. She met my eyes, one eyebrow raised in a silent question I couldn't answer. Of course, I repeated, moving behind the bar to print his receipt. His credit card was black, heavy, the kind with no spending limit. I processed the payment with hands that wanted to shake but didn't, hyper-aware of him sitting there, watching me work. You study design, he said. My fingers froze on the keyboard. What? Graphic design. You take online courses through Northwestern. Blood rushed in my ears. How did you... You mentioned it to another server, 3 weeks ago. You were discussing a project on typography. I had. Brief conversation with Maria during a slow Tuesday, complaining about an assignment that required hand lettering when digital tools existed for a reason, but that he'd heard it, remembered it, filed it away. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. He stood, sliding a 20 onto the bar, though the tip was already included on his receipt. Just noticing you work very hard, here and elsewhere. Then he was gone, moving toward the exit with that measured grace I'd watched a dozen times. His companions materialized from corners I hadn't seen them occupy, falling into formation around him like practiced choreography. Vanessa appeared at my elbow. What was that? I have no idea. Dominic Lombardi just complimented your work ethic and knew about your classes. She kept her voice low, barely audible over the music. Liv, that man owns half the South Side. He doesn't notice waitresses unless there's a reason. Maybe he's just observant. Nobody's that observant by accident. She was right. I knew she was right. But my phone was buzzing again in my pocket. Tyler, always Tyler. And I was too tired to unpack what it meant that a man like Dominic Lombardi had been paying attention. I finished my shift, counted my tips, changed out of my uniform in the staff bathroom. The night air hit like a wall when I stepped outside. October in Chicago already hinting at the brutal winter ahead. I'd walk home like always, 6 blocks through streets I knew by heart. My phone lit up with another call. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. I declined it, blocked the number for the 8th time, and started walking. Somewhere in the darkness, I felt it again. That sensation of being observed. But when I looked over my shoulder, the street was empty except for shadows and the distant glow of traffic lights painting the asphalt red. Tyler showed up on a Tuesday. I was refilling water glasses at table 7 when I felt the shift in atmosphere, the way a room goes quiet before a storm breaks. Not silent, exactly. The conversations continued. The jazz still played. But something fundamental had changed in the molecular structure of the air itself. He sat in my section. Center table, impossible to avoid. Wearing the charcoal suit he knew I'd once said made him look handsome. His smile was the one I'd fallen for 2 years ago, before I'd learned to recognize the calculation underneath. Liv. He stood as I approached, like this was a date instead of an ambush. You look beautiful. My fingers tightened on the water pitcher. Tyler, you need to leave. I'm a paying customer. Still smiling, but there was steel beneath the charm. Can't kick me out for wanting dinner at a nice restaurant. You called 47 times last week, because you won't talk to me. You changed your number twice. What was I supposed to do? Every eye in my section was on us now. I felt them like pressure against my skin. Curiosity and discomfort radiating from well-dressed diners who'd come for osso buco and tiramisu, Not a front row seat to my personal disaster. "I'll get your server," I managed, already turning away. His hand caught my wrist. Not hard, not painful, but firm. Possessive. "Don't walk away from me." "Sir." Our manager, Robert, appeared with the practiced smoothness of someone who'd diffused situations before. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I haven't even ordered yet." Tyler's grip on my wrist loosened, but didn't release. "Just wanted to have a conversation with my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," I corrected, pulling free. "See, that's the problem. You decided we were done without actually talking it through. Healthy relationships require communication, Liv. We can't fix things if you won't even—" "The lady asked you to leave." A new voice, low and accented, cut through Tyler's monologue like a blade through silk. Dominic Lombardi stood 3 tables away, having risen from the bar with the kind of deliberate calm that made my pulse spike for reasons I couldn't name. He didn't move closer. Didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the balance of power in the room. Tyler's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you. You're disrupting my dinner." Dominic's tone remained conversational, almost pleasant. "That concerns me." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Tyler with his salesman bravado and expensive suit. Dominic with the kind of authority that came from never having to raise his voice to be heard. Then Tyler's gaze slid to me, to Robert, back to Dominic. "Fine." He threw his napkin onto the table with theatrical disgust. "This is ridiculous. I'll call you later, Liv. We're not done talking." "Yes, we are." He left. But the threat lingered like smoke after a fire. I stood there, water pitcher still in hand, aware of Dominic settling back onto his bar stool, aware of the other diners pretending they weren't staring, aware that my hands were shaking, and I couldn't make them stop. "You okay?" Vanessa materialized at my elbow, guiding me toward the bar with gentle pressure. "Fine." "You're not fine. You're pale as a ghost." She took the pitcher from me, set it aside. "That was Tyler?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Olivia." Robert joined us, his managerial concern warring with the practical reality of running a restaurant. "I'm documenting this. If he comes back, we'll call the police." "He won't come back." But I didn't believe it even as I said it. The rest of the shift blurred. I moved through tables on autopilot, delivering plates and pouring wine and smiling until my face hurt. Dominic remained at the bar, his presence a constant weight in my peripheral vision. When I caught his eye once, he gave the slightest nod, acknowledgement or reassurance I couldn't tell. The days that followed proved me right. Tyler didn't return to Vincenzo's, but his calls multiplied. Unknown numbers lit up my phone at all hours. Text messages arrived from burner accounts. Apologies mixed with accusations. Promises twisted with threats that never quite crossed into illegal territory. He showed up outside my apartment building. Not inside, not technically violating any boundary I could report, just standing across the street, watching my windows. When I took a different route to work, he found the new one. When I varied my schedule, he adjusted his. "You need to go to the police," Vanessa said for the 3rd time that week. We were closing up Vincenzo's, the dining room empty except for us, and the lingering smell of garlic and wine. "And tell them what? That my ex-boyfriend exists in public spaces? That he's stalking you. He hasn't made any actual threats. He just wants to talk." I heard how hollow that sounded. "It'll escalate things. Make him angrier." Vanessa leaned against the bar, studying me with the particular intensity she reserved for when I was being stupid, and she was deciding how bluntly to say so. "When you two were together, did he ever—" "He never hit me." I knew where she was going. "Never even came close." "That's not what I was asking." "No." But the truth was complicated. Tyler had never been physically violent, but he'd been other things. Controlling. Jealous. In the beginning, it felt like devotion. The way he always wanted to know where I was, who I was with. The flowers he sent to my shifts at Vincenzo's came with notes asking why I hadn't texted him back within 5 minutes. The surprise visits to check on me were really checkups to see if I was where I'd said I'd be. By the end, I'd stopped seeing friends because it was easier than dealing with his interrogations afterward. Stopped going to study sessions for my design courses because he'd accused the other students of flirting with me. Nearly stopped working entirely because he'd gotten promoted. made decent money selling pharmaceutical equipment, and insisted I didn't need to serve strangers when I could be home with him. The night I ended it, he'd gone through my phone while I was in the shower. Found a text from a male classmate about a group project. The argument that followed lasted 4 hours, circling and circling until I couldn't remember what I'd done wrong, but knew it must be something. Must be my fault for making him feel this way. I'd looked at him across our apartment. His apartment, really, since I'd moved in with him a year prior, and realized I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't remember what I wanted beyond the constant work of managing his emotions. So I left. Moved in with a friend from work, then found my own studio 6 blocks from Vincenzo's. Changed my number, blocked him on every platform, thought that would be the end. He's not going to stop, Vanessa said quietly, pulling me from the memory. Men like that don't just accept losing control. Thursday arrived with the particular cold that October in Chicago specialized in. Not winter yet, but close. The wind off the lake cutting through clothing like a promise of worse to come. The forecast called for storms. By the time my shift started, heavy clouds pressed against the city like a lid on a pot ready to boil over. I moved through my tables with practiced efficiency, hyper-aware of every man who walked through the door, every silhouette that passed the windows. Dominic arrived at 8, same as always. He took his usual seat at the bar, ordered his usual ossobuco, acknowledged me with the smallest inclination of his head. His companions tonight numbered 3, more than typical. They positioned themselves throughout the restaurant with the kind of casual precision that suggested nothing about their placement was casual at all. "He's been here more often," Vanessa murmured as she poured a whiskey neat. 4 times this week instead of the usual 3. Maybe he likes the food. Or maybe he's keeping an eye on things. She slid the glass across the bar toward where one of Dominic's men sat. "Anthony Greco. He's Lombardi's captain. Word is he doesn't leave the boss's side unless there's a reason." I didn't ask how she knew that. Vanessa had worked at Vincenzo's for 5 years, long enough to recognize the patterns of power that moved through a place like this. The first drops of rain hit the windows around 9:30. By 10, it was a downpour, the kind that turned streets into rivers and made umbrellas useless. I was delivering tiramisu to a couple celebrating an anniversary when the door opened, letting in a gust of wind and water. Tyler stood in the entrance, soaked through, hair plastered to his skull, chest heaving like he'd run the whole way. His eyes found mine across the restaurant, and I saw it. The moment calculation gave way to something rawer, more desperate. This was going to get worse before it got better. Tyler didn't wait for an invitation. He moved through the dining room like he owned it, water dripping from his jacket onto pristine hardwood, leaving a trail that marked his path like breadcrumbs in a nightmare. Conversations faltered as he passed. The couple celebrating their anniversary stopped mid-toast. A businessman paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Liv." My name came out rough, desperate. "We need to talk. Now." I set the tiramisu down on the nearest table with hands that had gone numb. "Tyler, you can't be here. Robert already told you." "I don't care what Robert said." His voice climbed, drawing more eyes. "You've been avoiding me for 3 months. 3 months of silence, of pretending I don't exist. That's not how you end a 2-year relationship. I told you why I left." My voice came out smaller than I wanted, throat tight with the particular humiliation of having this conversation in front of an audience. "We talked about it. Multiple times." "No. You talked. You made accusations. You decided I was controlling when I was just trying to protect us." He stepped closer, and I stepped back, bumping into a chair. "You left because you listened to your friends instead of me. That bartender, what's her name? Vanessa? She never liked me. She got in your head." "Sir," Robert appeared again, but his authority felt thin now, stretched across a situation that was already spiraling beyond managerial intervention. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead." Tyler barely glanced at him. "I haven't done anything illegal. I'm having a conversation with someone I care about." His eyes found mine again, and there was something wild in them now. Something that made my stomach drop. "You owe me that much. After everything I did for you, everything I gave up, you didn't give up anything." The words came before I could stop them. 2 years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. "You isolated me. Monitored my phone. Made me quit seeing friends because you decided they were bad influences. That's not love, Tyler. That's control. His face flushed red. I protected you. From people who didn't understand what we had. From men who looked at you like, he gestured vaguely around the restaurant, like these people look at you, like you're just something to consume. That's my job. I'm a waitress. You could do so much more than this. He took another step forward, and I had nowhere left to retreat. I wanted you to quit so you could focus on your design work. Build something real instead of serving pasta to strangers who don't give a damn about you. I wanted to work. I needed my own money, my own life. Your own life? He laughed, sharp and bitter. So you could do what? Take online classes that cost a fortune and go nowhere. Waste time on hobbies when we could have been building a future. My vision tunneled. This was it. The conversation we'd had a dozen times in different variations. The one that always ended with me apologizing for wanting things outside of him. Outside of us. I'm not doing this here. Then where? You won't answer my calls. Won't meet me. Changed your number twice. What was I supposed to do, Liv? Just accept that you threw away 2 years? I didn't throw away anything. I left because I couldn't breathe anymore. That's bullshit. His hand shot out, caught my arm just above the elbow. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his point. You're coming with me. We're going to sit down somewhere private and actually talk this through like adults. Let go of me. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. He was pulling now, tugging me toward the back of the restaurant, toward the corridor that led to the bathrooms and the kitchen. 5 minutes to explain why you're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you. I tried to pull back, but his grip tightened. The restaurant spun around us. Faces turning, someone standing. Vanessa's voice calling my name from somewhere far away. Tyler's fingers dug into my arm hard enough that I knew there would be marks tomorrow, purple proof of this moment. Tyler, stop! Just 5 minutes! His voice cracked, and for a second I saw him as he was, desperate, unraveling, a man who'd built his identity around controlling someone and couldn't accept that the foundation had crumbled. That's all I need, to make you understand. She said stop. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Low, accented, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command attention. Tyler froze. His grip on my arm loosened fractionally as he turned, and I turned with him. Both of us pulled by the magnetic weight of that voice. Dominic Lombardi stood 5 feet away, having crossed the dining room with the kind of silence that made me wonder how long he'd been moving. His suit was dry despite the rain hammering the windows, his dark hair perfectly in place. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, brown so deep they looked black, fixed on Tyler with the focused intensity of a predator who just identified prey. This doesn't concern you, Tyler said. But his voice had lost its edge. You're disrupting my dinner. Dominic took a single step forward. And somehow that small movement carried more threat than Tyler's entire scene. That concerns me. I'm talking to my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend. I found my voice, though it shook. He's my ex. Then she's asked you to stop. Dominic's tone remained conversational, almost pleasant, which made it more terrifying. You should listen. Tyler's hand was still on my arm, fingers curled into my flesh. I felt the moment his grip shifted from possessive to defensive. Felt him calculate his options and come up short. This is between me and Liv. It's personal. Nothing is personal when you make it public. Dominic glanced at Robert, who stood frozen between intervention and self-preservation. Call the police. File a report. Get this gentleman's identification for the record. That's not necessary. Tyler started. It is. Not a suggestion. A statement of fact. You've assaulted someone in my establishment. That has consequences. I didn't assault anyone. I just wanted to talk. But Tyler's hand dropped from my arm, finally, fingers releasing with visible reluctance. I stumbled back, caught myself on a chair. My arm throbbed where he'd gripped it, and when I looked down, red marks were already blooming into something darker. Dominic saw it. I watched his expression shift. Not dramatically, just a tightening around his eyes. A subtle change in the set of his jaw that nonetheless communicated volumes. When he looked at Tyler again, something had changed in the atmosphere between them. like the pressure drop before a storm breaks. "You should leave," Dominic said quietly. "Now, before this becomes something you regret more than you already will." For a long moment, Tyler stood there, wet and humiliated, looking between Dominic's calm authority and my silence. Then he turned to me one last time. "This isn't over, Liv. We're not done." "Yes, we are." "No." He shook his head, water droplets flying. "You don't get to decide that unilaterally. Relationships are about two people. You don't get to just quit." "Sir." One of Dominic's companions appeared, the one Vanessa had called Anthony Greco. Tall, silver-threaded hair, moving with the same controlled precision as his boss. "The door's this way." Another man materialized on Tyler's other side, not touching him, not threatening overtly, just present in a way that made the choice clear. Leave willingly or be removed. Tyler's face went through several expressions: anger, humiliation, defiance, defeat. Finally, he settled on injured dignity. "Fine, I'll go. But this conversation isn't finished. You can't avoid me forever." He left, flanked by Dominic's men, dripping water and wounded pride in equal measure. The door closed behind them, and the restaurant exhaled collectively, conversations resuming in hushed tones. I stood there, trembling, staring at the red marks on my arm that were darkening by the second into something that would be purple by morning. My throat felt tight, my chest constricted, like I couldn't quite remember how to breathe normally. "Olivia," Dominic's voice, gentler now. "Let me see." I looked up to find him standing close. Not crowding, not threatening, just present in a way that felt solid and grounding. He gestured to my arm, and I extended it without thinking. Watched his fingers hover over the marks without touching. "That will bruise." Not a question. An observation. "I'll be fine." "No." He lifted his gaze to mine, and I saw something there that made my pulse spike for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You won't be. Not until he understands there are consequences. It's worth everything." The intensity in his voice stopped my protest. "No one touches you like that. Not in my restaurant, not in my territory, not while I'm breathing." The weight of those words settled over me like a blanket, suffocating and comforting simultaneously. He wasn't asking my permission, wasn't negotiating, simply stating how things would be in his world, where his word was law and violations came with prices. I should have been frightened, should have been calculating escape routes and polite ways to decline protection I hadn't asked for. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest, some tension I'd been carrying for 3 months finally releasing. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, then turned to Robert. "She's done for the night. Pay her full shift, and get those police here to document this. I want a paper trail." Then he was moving back to the bar, his companions falling into position, the restaurant returning to its careful illusion of normalcy. Only Vanessa remained, pulling me into a hug that smelled like citrus and safety. "Holy shit," she breathed against my hair. "Dominic Lombardi just defended you like you were his own." "I know. Do you? Because that man doesn't involve himself in staff drama. Ever. He just made you his business, Liv. That's not nothing." I knew. God help me, I knew. And the most terrifying part was how much I wanted it to mean something. The police arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers who looked tired and skeptical in equal measure. I sat at a corner table with Vanessa beside me, giving my statement while one officer took notes, and the other photographed the marks on my arm, purple now, vivid against my pale skin, each finger impression distinct. "How long has this been going on?" Officer Ramirez asked, pen poised over her notepad. 3 months since I ended the relationship. But the calls started immediately. Then he found out where I work. Prior incidents of violence? No, not physical. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the restaurant's warmth. He was controlling, jealous. But he never hit me. Emotional abuse? The way she said it, not a question, recognition, made my throat tight. I guess. Yes. She exchanged a glance with her partner. "You need a restraining order. What happened tonight constitutes assault. The marks on your arm, the witnesses." She gestured around the restaurant where several diners had provided statements. You have a strong case. Will it actually stop him? It creates legal consequences if he violates it. Not a yes, not a promise, just reality wrapped in bureaucratic language. We'll file the report tonight. You can petition for a temporary order tomorrow morning. I'll include my recommendation. They left with their paperwork and photographs, and I sat there feeling hollowed out, scraped clean of whatever reserves had gotten me through the confrontation. The restaurant had mostly emptied, just a few lingering tables, and Vanessa closing out the register, and Dominic, still at the bar, nursing what looked like the same whiskey he'd ordered an hour ago. You should go home, Vanessa said gently. I'll finish up here. I can help. Liv. She squeezed my hand. Go. You've had enough for one night. I changed in the bathroom, trading my uniform for jeans and a burgundy sweater that had seen better days. My reflection looked washed out. Eyes too wide, purple marks visible even through the concealer I'd hastily applied. I looked like a victim, which I supposed I was, even if I hated the word. When I emerged, Dominic was waiting near the door, jacket on, car keys in hand. I'll take you home, he said. Not a question, not a demand. Just a statement of how things would be. You don't have to. It's raining. You live 6 blocks away. You just filed a police report against a man who knows your routine. His eyes met mine, dark and steady. Humor me. The SUV was warm and leather-scented, rain drumming against the roof in a rhythm that should have been soothing, but only made me more aware of the enclosed space, of Dominic behind the wheel, of the 2 men in the back seat who hadn't been introduced, but radiated the same controlled danger as their boss. How long were you together? Dominic asked as he pulled into traffic. 2 years. And he's been harassing you for 3 months since you ended it. He calls it trying to fix things. Says I gave up too easily. Didn't give him a chance to change. Did he need to change? The question caught me off guard. Not whether I was overreacting, whether I'd tried hard enough, whether maybe I'd been too sensitive. All the things Tyler had asked. Just a simple acknowledgement that if change was necessary, the problem existed. Yes. My voice cracked. He monitored my phone, got angry when I talked to male classmates about school projects, made me quit seeing friends because he decided they were bad influences. I thought it was because he loved me so much, you know? That level of attention felt like devotion at first. It's called control. Dominic's hands tightened fractionally on the steering wheel. Men who love you want you to grow. Men who own you want you to shrink. The truth of that settled into my bones, heavy and undeniable. I should have left sooner. You left. That's what matters. We pulled up to my building, a shabby walk-up that had been cheap enough to afford on my own. Security door that hadn't worked since the 90s. No doorman, no cameras. It looked especially grim in the rain, water streaming from a broken gutter, graffiti visible on the brick despite the darkness. Dominic killed the engine. I'm walking you up. That's really not... He was already out of the car, opening my door before I finished protesting. I climbed out into the rain, and he stayed close as we crossed to the entrance. Close enough that I felt the heat of him. The solid presence that somehow made the night feel less threatening. The stairs smelled like mildew, and someone's burned dinner. I climbed to the 3rd floor with Dominic behind me, hyper-aware of him in my space, in my building, seeing the poverty I worked so hard to escape from every day at Vincenzo's, where everything was beautiful and expensive and other people's. This is me. I stopped at 3B, keys already in hand. He waited while I unlocked the door, then reached into his jacket and produced a business card, thick stock, embossed lettering, a phone number but no name. My direct line. If he shows up, if you feel unsafe, anything, you call me immediately. Mr. Lombardi, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. His gaze held mine, intense enough that I had to remind myself to breathe. What happened tonight was unacceptable. It won't happen again. You can't know that. Yes, he said quietly. I can, because I don't tolerate men who hurt women in my territory. And you're in my territory now, Olivia, whether you realize it or not. He left before I could respond, disappearing down the stairs with footsteps that barely made sound. I stood in my doorway, card in hand, feeling like I'd just been claimed in some fundamental way I didn't fully understand, but couldn't bring myself to reject. The next morning, I filed for a temporary restraining order. The clerk was efficient, the judge perfunctory, and by noon I had a piece of paper that said Tyler Morrison had to stay 100 yards away from me at all times. It felt simultaneously powerful and worthless, a legal shield that was only as strong as Tyler's willingness to obey it. He violated it that same night. I was walking home from a late shift, stupid I knew, but Vanessa had been sick and I'd covered for her when I saw him. Across the street from my building, just standing there in the glow of a streetlight like he had every right to occupy that space. Liv. He started toward me the moment I appeared, and panic spiked through my chest so hard I couldn't breathe. The card. Dominic's card was in my pocket. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, nearly dropped it, managed to pull up the number and hit call. It rang once, twice, then his voice, sleep rough and alert simultaneously. Olivia, he's here. Outside my building. He's not supposed to be here, there's a restraining order, but he's... Stay where you are. Don't approach him. Don't engage. I'm sending someone. Dominic. 15 minutes. Can you stay safe for 15 minutes? Tyler was crossing the street now, moving with that determined stride I remembered too well. I don't know. Go into the bodega on the corner. Stay around people. I'll be there soon. I ran, literally ran the half block to the corner store, stumbled inside, while the owner looked up from his magazine with startled concern. Tyler followed, stopping at the door but not entering, just standing there watching me through the glass like a predator waiting for the herd to scatter. 11 minutes. That's how long it took for the black SUV to arrive, sleek and menacing, double parking with the kind of confidence that said traffic laws were suggestions. Anthony Greco stepped out, silver hair gleaming under streetlights, moving with lethal grace, and approached Tyler with purpose. I couldn't hear the conversation through the glass, but I saw Tyler's face go from defiant to pale, saw him take a step back, then another. Anthony pulled something from his jacket. Not a weapon, a phone, and handed it to Tyler. Tyler listened to whatever was said through that phone, and the color drained from his face entirely. He left, just turned and walked away like he'd been released from strings, disappearing into the night. Anthony retrieved his phone, glanced toward where I stood in the bodega, gave the slightest nod, then returned to the SUV and drove away. My phone buzzed. Text from Dominic's number. You're safe. He won't be back tonight. But he came back. Not that night, but the next week. And the week after. Always careful to stay just beyond the legal distance. Always watching. Always there. And every time, like clockwork, someone from Dominic's crew would appear. No confrontation, no violence, just presence. A reminder that I wasn't unprotected, that someone was watching back. I started noticing them at other times, too. The car that always seemed to be parked near my building. The man reading a newspaper at the coffee shop I frequented. The same faces in different locations. Never intrusive, never acknowledged, but always there. It should have felt suffocating. Should have triggered all the same alarm bells Tyler's monitoring had. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Safe. Because the crucial difference was choice. Dominic had offered protection, and I'd accepted it. He wasn't demanding access to my phone or questioning my whereabouts. He was simply ensuring Tyler couldn't hurt me again. This is insane, Vanessa said 2 weeks after the restaurant incident. We were having coffee before our shift, and she'd spotted yet another of Dominic's men positioned across the street. You have a Mafia boss's crew following you around Chicago, like you're under witness protection. I know, and you're okay with this. I thought about Tyler's face outside my building. About the 47 calls. About the 2 years I'd spent shrinking myself into something he could control. About how Dominic's protection felt less like a cage and more like breathing room. Yeah, I said finally. I think I am. Dominic returned to Vincenzo's a week after Tyler's removal from my life. Or attempted removal. Since Tyler's presence lingered like smoke in fabric, impossible to fully wash away. But this time, when Dominic arrived, he didn't take his usual seat at the bar. He chose a table in my section. Center of the room, impossible to miss, deliberate in its statement. Mr. Lombardi. I approached with my order pad, though by now I knew his preferences by heart. Your usual spot at the bar is available if you'd prefer. I prefer this. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. When you have a moment, sit. I'm working. I'm aware. When you have a moment. Robert caught my eye from across the room, gave the smallest nod of permission, or maybe surrender. Hard to tell the difference when it came to accommodating Dominic Lombardi's requests. I sat during a lull between courses, perched on the edge of the chair like I might need to spring up at any second. Which I might. Waitressing didn't allow for extended breaks, even when invited by customers who apparently owned half the South Side. How are you? He asked, and the directness of it, no preamble, no small talk, caught me off guard. Fine. Tired. Working. Tyler hasn't contacted you again? He tried. 4 times yesterday from different numbers. I didn't answer. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from fidgeting. Your people keep showing up when he does. I appreciate it, but I can't keep accepting indefinitely. I can't afford private security, and I don't want to owe... You don't owe me anything. His voice was firm, but not harsh. And there's no payment expected. No debt accrued. I don't tolerate men who hurt women. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, he agreed. But my position on it is. He put his hands on you in my establishment. That made it personal. What happens after is just... consequence. The way he said consequence made it sound inevitable, like gravity or sunrise. Not a choice, but a fundamental law of his universe. Table 9 needs their appetizers, Vanessa called from the kitchen window, saving me from having to respond. I stood, but Dominic caught my wrist, gently. Nothing like Tyler's grip. Just enough pressure to make me pause. When does your shift end? 11. I'll be here. He was. And the night after. And the one after that. Always choosing tables in my section. Always timing his arrival to catch the later hours when the restaurant grew quieter. When conversations could stretch between delivering plates and refilling wine glasses. We talked about nothing and everything. His frustration with a supplier who kept shorting deliveries. My exhaustion from juggling shifts and online coursework. The way Chicago winters felt colder every year. You study design, he said on the 3rd night. Statement, not question. When I can stay awake long enough, which isn't often. I wiped down the table beside his, giving my hands something to do. I started 3 years ago thinking I'd build a career out of it. Open my own studio, do freelance work. Now I'm just accumulating knowledge I'm too tired to use. Why do you keep going? Because giving up feels like admitting Tyler was right. That working here, serving people, was all I was capable of. That dreams were just distractions from real life. The words came out more bitter than I intended. Sorry, that's not your problem. I asked. He leaned back, studying me with that intensity I was learning to recognize. What kind of design? Graphics, mostly. Logos, branding, web layouts. Stuff companies need but don't want to pay full agency rates for. I thought I could undercut the big players, work from home, build clientele through referrals. You could. Not you should. Or maybe someday. Just a flat statement of capability. In theory. In practice, I barely have time to complete assignments, much less hunt for clients. What if someone hunted for you, connected you with businesses that need your skills? I stopped wiping the table, straightened to look at him properly. Why would someone do that? Because talent matters, and you're wasting yours hauling plates when you could be creating something. The weight of that observation settled over me, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Before I could respond, a party of 6 arrived, demanding attention, and the moment passed. But his words stuck with me through the rest of the shift, through the walk home with one of his men shadowing me from a discreet distance, through the early morning hours when I sat at my laptop working on typography assignments with eyes that burned from exhaustion. Vanessa cornered me during pre-shift the following evening. We need to talk about your situation. My situation? Dominic Lombardi. The man who has eaten dinner in your section every night this week. The one whose crew follows you home. The one you're developing feelings for, despite knowing exactly what he is. I'm not... Don't. She held up a hand. I've known you 2 years. I can read you like a menu. You're falling for him. That's insane. He's just being protective because of what happened. It doesn't mean anything beyond live. Men like Dominic don't do anything that doesn't mean something. Every action is calculated. Every choice has purpose. If he's spending this much time with you, it's because he wants to. And that's dangerous. Why? Because he's involved in crime? Because people respect him out of fear? I heard the defensiveness in my voice. Hated it. Couldn't stop it. He's treated me better in 2 weeks than Tyler did in 2 years. That's a low bar. Maybe. But it's my bar. My choice. I pulled on my apron. Tied it with more force than necessary. I'm not some damsel who needs rescuing from myself. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're replacing one intense relationship with another. Tyler suffocated you. Dominic is different. The word came out hard, final. He gives me space, respects boundaries, doesn't demand access to my phone or question my whereabouts. Yes, he's protective, but protection and possession aren't the same thing. Vanessa sighed, the fight draining from her expression. I just don't want you hurt. Again. I know, but I'm not made of glass. And I'm not blind to what this is. Except I was, maybe, blind to how deep it was going, how fast, blind to the way my heart jumped when Dominic walked through the door each night, blind to how I'd started timing my breaks to coincide with his arrival, how I'd catch myself smoothing my hair before approaching his table. 2 weeks after the initial incident at Vincenzo's, everything changed. I woke to pounding on my apartment door at 2 a.m. He hammered the frame until it shivered. Apology nodded with accusation. Hands shaking, I called Dominic. Do not open it, he said. Headlights carved the thin curtains. The pounding stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall. When she finally slept, it was with the paper-thin courage of knowing morning came with a courtroom. The courthouse smelled like institutional anxiety and bad coffee. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom, hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking, watching lawyers and defendants and people with problems bigger than mine file past in an endless parade of Chicago's justice system at work. You ready? Dominic appeared beside me, settling onto the bench with the kind of ease that suggested courthouses were just another Tuesday for him. He wore a different suit today, charcoal instead of black, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. Still the gold chain, always the gold chain, gleaming against olive skin. As ready as I'll ever be for legal proceedings against my ex-boyfriend. The judge will ask questions. Answer honestly. Don't downplay what happened. His eyes found mine. Held them. Men like Tyler count on women minimizing their behavior. Don't give him that. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. Tyler sat across the courtroom with a lawyer he'd somehow afforded, looking wounded and bewildered, like he couldn't comprehend how loving someone had led to this. I gave my testimony. The calls, the messages, the restaurant incident, the 2 a.m. assault on my door. Tyler's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone weaponizing the legal system against a man who just wanted closure. Then Dominic took the stand. He described what he'd witnessed at Vincenzo's with clinical precision. Tyler's grip on my arm, the marks it left, my visible fear, the way Tyler had escalated from request to demand to physical force in under 3 minutes. When Tyler's lawyer tried to suggest Dominic had ulterior motives for his testimony, Dominic simply said, I don't tolerate men who put their hands on women. That's not an ulterior motive. That's a moral baseline. The judge granted a 2-year order. Tyler would stay 100 yards from me, from Vincenzo's, from my apartment building. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Tyler's face went through a progression of emotions. Shock, anger, humiliation, before settling on something harder, more calculating. As he left the courtroom, his eyes found mine. And the look he gave me promised this wasn't over despite what the law said. Dominic caught it too. I felt him tense beside me, saw his jaw tighten fractionally, but he said nothing, just placed a hand on the small of my back and guided me out through a side exit that avoided Tyler's route. He's not going to respect that order, I said once we were outside, cold November wind cutting through my jacket. I know. So, what was the point? Documentation. Legal standing. When he violates it, and he will, there are consequences now. Real ones. He opened the passenger door of his SUV. Plus, it establishes pattern for when this escalates further. When, not if. Men like Tyler don't accept loss. They reframe it as temporary setback, as something to overcome. The restraining order is just another obstacle in his mind, not an ending. The bleakness of that assessment should have terrified me. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like finally someone was being honest about the situation, instead of offering platitudes about how the legal system would protect me. A week passed. Weeks didn't pass so much as smudge. Work shifts bleeding into cold mornings. Her phone finally quiet. Safety arriving in layers thin as tissue. By the time the city exhaled, she had stopped flinching at shadows and started noticing the light again. Then another. Weeks didn't pass so much as smudge. Work shifts bleeding into cold mornings. Her phone finally quiet. Safety arriving in layers thin as tissue. By the time the city exhaled, she had stopped flinching at shadows and started noticing the light again. Tyler didn't call, didn't appear outside my building, didn't materialize at Vincenzo's during my shifts. The silence felt more ominous than his constant presence, like waiting for thunder after seeing lightning. He's planning something, I told Vanessa during a quiet Wednesday afternoon. This isn't like him. Giving up. Maybe Dominic's protection actually worked. Maybe Tyler finally got the message. Or maybe he's just being smarter about it. Dominic called that evening while I was finishing a typography assignment that was due in 2 days, and I'd barely started. You free tomorrow night? I work until 9. After. I want to take you to dinner. Somewhere that isn't Vincenzo's. My fingers froze on the keyboard. Like a date? Like a conversation. About things we should probably discuss before this goes further. Before what goes further? Silence stretched between us, loaded with everything we'd been circling around for weeks. Finally, you know what, Olivia? Don't pretend you don't. He picked me up at 9:30 in the SUV that had become familiar, drove us to a restaurant in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Quiet, expensive, the kind of place where reservations were made weeks in advance, and Dominic walked in without one and still got the best table. We sat in a corner booth with red leather and low lighting, and for the first time since I'd met him, I felt like I was seeing Dominic outside the context of crisis management. Tell me about your family, he said after we'd ordered. Not much to tell. Only child. Parents divorced when I was 12. Dad remarried, moved to Arizona. Mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. The familiar ache of that loss never quite faded. She was a teacher. Elementary school. She would have hated what happened with Tyler. Would have told me to run the first time he checked my phone. Why didn't you? Because I didn't realize I needed to. It happened so gradually. The checking became routine. The jealousy became proof he cared. By the time I understood what it was, I'd already normalized it. I took a sip of wine, let it burn down my throat. What about your family? Father died when I was 22. Heart attack in his office. Mother passed when I was 8. Domestic violence situation that ended badly. His expression didn't change, but I felt the weight of that history between us. She stayed with a man who hit her because leaving felt more dangerous than staying, until the day staying became fatal. Dominic. That's why I react the way I do to situations like yours. Because I watched my mother shrink herself trying to manage a man who couldn't be managed. And I've spent my adult life ensuring that doesn't happen to women in my territory. The admission hung between us, heavy with implications. This wasn't just protection. This was personal. This was a man working out childhood trauma through present action. And I was somehow caught in that machinery. I need you to understand what I am, he said quietly. What my business involves. I'm not going to lie to you or pretend I'm something I'm not. You're an organized crime. I run operations that exist outside legal framework. I make decisions that have consequences. People work for me who do things that would appall you if you knew the details. His eyes never left mine. I'm not asking you to approve, just to understand that this is my world, and being close to me means existing adjacent to it. And if I can't handle that, then you walk away now, before this becomes something neither of us can extricate from easily. I should have walked. Should have thanked him for his honesty and his protection and his intervention, then extracted myself from a situation that could only end badly. Instead, I reached across the table, placed my hand over his. I'm not walking away. Part of her wanted to run. Another part recognized she'd already crossed that line the night he stood between her and a man who wouldn't hear the word no. Fear was honest. So was the steadiness he offered. Both could be true at once. Olivia, I know what you are. I'm not naive, but you've treated me with more respect in a month than Tyler did in 2 years. You've protected me without controlling me. You've seen me at my worst and haven't tried to fix me, just supported me. That's worth something. He turned his hand over, laced his fingers through mine. This won't be simple. I don't want simple. I want honest. The relationship that developed over the following weeks was exactly that. Honest in its complexity, cautious in its progression. Dominic took me to dinner twice more at places where we could talk without interruption. We walked along the lake despite the November cold, his hand in mine, discussing everything and nothing. He asked about my design work, looked at my portfolio with genuine interest, offered connections to business owners who might need branding services. I'm not a charity case, I said when he mentioned the third potential client. I'm not treating you like one. I'm leveraging resources. You have skills people need. I know people who need those skills. That's called networking, not rescue. He was patient in ways that felt deliberate, like he'd made a conscious choice to let me set the pace. When we kissed goodnight after our second real date, he pulled back first, gave me the choice to deepen it or stop. When I invited him up to my apartment for coffee that actually meant coffee, he came but left before midnight, respecting boundaries I'd barely articulated. You're different with her, I heard Anthony tell him one night at Vincenzo's when I was closing out my register. They didn't know I could hear them from the bar. Softer. More human. She makes me want to be, Dominic replied. 4 weeks after the initial incident at the restaurant, Tyler vanished. I didn't notice immediately. His absence had become the new normal, his threats morphing into background radiation I'd learned to live with. But when I mentioned to Vanessa that I hadn't seen or heard from him in over a week, she gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. About that, she said slowly. Amy from the coffee shop said she heard Tyler moved. Like, out of state moved. Took a job in Minnesota or Michigan or somewhere that starts with M. When? Last week? Maybe the week before. She said his coworkers at the pharmaceutical company were surprised. He just quit without notice, packed up, disappeared. I absorbed this information, turned it over in my mind. Did Dominic have something to do with that? Do you want to know? I considered. If Dominic had intervened, it meant Tyler was gone because someone with power had made him go. If Tyler had left on his own, it meant he'd finally accepted defeat. Either way, the result was the same. I could breathe without checking over my shoulder. No, I decided. I don't want to know. Vanessa squeezed my shoulder, understanding more than I'd said. That evening, Anthony found me during my break, cornered me in the staff area with an expression that suggested this wasn't social. We should talk. About Dominic, you, what this is becoming. I crossed my arms, suddenly defensive. I'm not sure that's your business. It's my business when my boss starts making decisions based on personal feelings instead of strategic advantage. It's my business when someone I care about is getting attached to a woman who might not understand what that attachment means. He leaned against the wall, studying me. He's serious about you. More serious than I've seen him about anyone. That changes things. Changes them how? Makes you a target. Makes you leverage. Makes you the thing people use to hurt him if they want to cause damage. His voice was matter of fact, not cruel. That's the reality of caring about someone in our world. Your safety becomes his vulnerability. So what, I should leave? Save him from being vulnerable. I'm saying you should know what you're signing up for. The protection, the attention, the way he looks at you. It comes with weight. Can you handle that weight? Are you prepared for what being his means? I thought about Tyler's obsession, about how love had twisted into possession, about chains disguised as devotion. Then I thought about Dominic asking permission before kissing me, about the space he gave me to choose, about protection that came with autonomy instead of control. I don't know, I admitted, but I know I want to try. Anthony nodded once, seemingly satisfied. Then hold on tight. It's going to get complicated. He was right. It already was complicated. But standing there in the staff room of an Italian restaurant, thinking about a man who'd stepped into my chaos and offered steadiness instead of more storms, I realized complicated was exactly what I wanted. Weeks blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected, the city turning pages for them while they learned how to breathe in the same sentence. 2 months after that first honest conversation over dinner, I woke in Dominic's bed, with December sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city I was learning to see differently. His property wasn't what I'd expected. Not ostentatious, not dripping with wealth like some mobster stereotype. Just clean lines, expensive taste, and windows that let in so much light it felt like living inside a photograph. "You're staring," Dominic said without opening his eyes, one arm draped across my waist, pulling me closer against the warmth of him. "Just thinking. About? How different this is from what I imagined my life would look like at 25. He opened his eyes then, those dark brown irises catching the morning light. Better or worse? Complicated. I traced the tattoo on his shoulder. A raven in flight, wings spread wide. But not worse. We'd fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks that felt both natural and impossible. I spent 3 nights a week here, 4 at my apartment, maintaining the independence I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Dominic never pushed for more, never questioned my need for space. Instead, he'd helped me carve out room to breathe in ways I hadn't known I needed, like my design work. 2 weeks ago, he'd connected me with a small business owner who needed a logo rebrand, then another who wanted website graphics, then a third. Suddenly I had a portfolio of paid work, not just class assignments, and the dream of freelancing felt less like fantasy and more like foundation. "I talked to Robert yesterday," I said, sitting up against the headboard. Asked about reducing my shifts at Vincenzo's. Dominic propped himself up on one elbow, attention fully focused. What did he say? That he'd been expecting it. Offered me 3 shifts a week instead of 5. Evenings only, so I have mornings and afternoons for design work. The relief I'd felt hearing those words hadn't faded. I can actually do this. Build something that's mine. You could have done it without me. Maybe. Eventually. But you gave me permission to prioritize it. To believe it was worth prioritizing. I ran my fingers through his hair, dark and slightly curled from sleep. Tyler would have called it a distraction. Would have found reasons why it was impractical, or selfish, or whatever excuse justified keeping me small. I'm not Tyler. I know. That's the point. We had coffee on the terrace despite the cold, wrapped in blankets while watching Chicago wake up below us. This was my favorite part of staying here, the quiet moments before the world demanded his attention, before he became the man who commanded territory and loyalty and fear in equal measure. "There's something I need to tell you," Dominic said, setting his cup down with careful precision that immediately put me on alert. "Situation's developing. Cartel del Golfo trying to push into my territory. They've been testing boundaries, making moves that suggest escalation." My stomach dropped. "How dangerous?" "Potentially very. They're not subtle operators. More violent, less strategic than groups I usually deal with." He took my hand, thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I want you somewhere secure until it's resolved. My compound outside the city is—" "No. Olivia, I'm not running every time there's danger. If I do that, I'll never stop running. Your world is dangerous by nature. There will always be another threat, another situation, another reason to hide." I pulled the blanket tighter, more against his words than the cold. "I can't live like that. I'm trying to keep you safe. I know, but there's a difference between reasonable precautions and putting me in a cage, even a gilded one. Tyler wanted me safe too. Safe meant isolated, controlled, monitored. I won't go back to that." Frustration flickered across his face. Quickly controlled but visible. "This isn't the same. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to ensure you don't get hurt in crossfire that has nothing to do with you. Everything to do with you has something to do with me now. That's how this works." I set my own cup down, met his eyes directly. I'll accept reasonable security. Extra guards, different routes home, whatever makes strategic sense. But I'm not disappearing from my life because other criminals are making yours complicated. We argued for an hour, voices rising then falling, neither of us willing to bend completely. Finally, we found compromise. Enhanced security protocols, limited public exposure during high-risk periods, but I kept working, kept living, kept existing as myself instead of someone's protected asset. "You're stubborn," he said. But there was something like respect underneath the exasperation. "You're overbearing, only when people I care about are in danger. Then I guess you're going to be overbearing a lot, because danger seems to be your default setting." He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he could somehow transfer his protection through contact alone. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "If something happens to you because I couldn't keep you safe, then we'll deal with it. Together. Not with me locked away somewhere waiting for permission to live again." 3 days later, they tried to take me. I was leaving Vincenzo's through the back entrance. Stupid, I knew, but it was the quickest route to where one of Dominic's men waited with the car. The alley was dark, trash bins creating shadows deep enough to hide threats I should have anticipated. They came from both sides. 2 men, moving with military precision, blocking my path forward and back. I opened my mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it, arm around my waist, lifting me off the ground. She hadn't realized Dominic's men had layered the block. One in the idling car, one on the rooftop, another posted at the mouth of the alley. Quiet geometry meant to buy her seconds if anyone tried to take them. Gunfire erupted. Not from my attackers. From the rooftop. From the car that suddenly screamed into the alley. From positions I hadn't known were occupied but apparently had been all along. The man holding me dropped, his grip loosening as blood bloomed across his shoulder. His partner ran, disappearing into the maze of back alleys with the kind of desperation that suggested he knew exactly who he'd just crossed. Anthony was there suddenly, weapon drawn, scanning for additional threats while another man helped me to my feet. My ears rang from the gunshots. My hands shook so badly I couldn't seem to control them. Blood splattered the concrete. Not mine. The man who'd grabbed me, but close enough that I could smell it, metallic and immediate. "Are you hurt?" Anthony's voice seemed to come from far away, filtered through the shock blanking my thoughts. "No, I don't think so. They just... Get her to the car. Now, secure the area and find out who sent them." The drive to Dominic's property passed in fragments. Streets blurring past. The weight of a jacket someone had draped over my shoulders. The taste of copper in my mouth where I'd bitten my lip without realizing. When we arrived, Dominic met us at the door, and the expression on his face when he saw me, relief and rage competing for dominance, made my eyes sting. He didn't say anything, just pulled me inside, checked me over with hands that trembled slightly, then held me until the shaking stopped. "They're dead," he said quietly. Much later, when we were sitting in his study with whiskey, neither of us was drinking. Everyone involved in tonight. Everyone who gave the order. By morning, the Cartel del Golfo will understand that touching you means war they can't win. I should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from the casual way he described violence, the matter-of-fact tone suggesting this was just business as usual. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction. A primal relief that the men who'd tried to hurt me would never try again. "Does that make me terrible?" I whispered. "That I'm not upset about that? It makes you human. Self-preservation isn't a moral failing. Vanessa would say I'm rationalizing. That I'm letting you change who I am. Are you?" He turned to face me fully. Changed? I thought about it honestly. About who I'd been with Tyler. Small, anxious, constantly managing someone else's emotions. About who I was now. Still cautious, still working through trauma, but growing into space I'd forgotten existed. Maybe, but not in the ways that matter. You're not making me smaller. You're just showing me I don't have to apologize for taking up space. 2 days later, Vanessa cornered me in the staff room at Vincenzo's. "We need to talk about what happened." "I'm fine." You almost got kidnapped by a drug cartel because you're dating a crime boss. That's not fine, Liv. That's insane. I know what it sounds like. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you've traded one dangerous relationship for another. Tyler isolated you emotionally. Dominic's putting you in physical danger. How is that better? Because I have a choice. The words came out sharper than intended. Tyler made decisions for me. Dominic makes them with me. Yes, his world is dangerous, but he doesn't hide that from me. Doesn't pretend it's something it's not. And when I say I need independence, he gives it to me. That's the difference. Even if that independence almost got you killed, I'm alive because he had people protecting me. Because he anticipated this and prepared for it without turning me into a prisoner. I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I know you're worried. I know this looks crazy from the outside, but Vanessa, I love him. I love him in ways that don't make sense, that probably aren't smart, but are real anyway. Her expression softened fractionally. Does he love you? He hasn't said it. But yeah, I think he does. And that's worth the risk? Worth looking over your shoulder forever? Worth knowing that people might use you to hurt him? I don't know. Maybe, probably. I met her eyes, saw the concern there, the genuine fear for my well-being. But I know that walking away feels impossible, and staying feels like breathing for the first time in years. So yeah, I guess it's worth it. She hugged me then, fierce and quick, before pulling back with her usual practical expression firmly in place. Fine. But if he ever makes you feel small, if this turns into Tyler with better security, you tell me. Promise. I promise. That night, lying in Dominic's bed with his arm around me, and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't infatuation or gratitude masquerading as feeling. This was the real thing. Messy, complicated, probably inadvisable, but undeniably mine. And whatever came next, whatever dangers his world brought to my door, I was choosing to face them. Not because I had no other options, but because this man, this life, this impossible situation felt more like home than anything I'd known in years. That had to mean something. It had to be worth something. I chose to believe it was worth everything. Weeks blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected. The city turning pages for them while they learned how to breathe in the same sentence. 3 months. That's how long it took for the world to shift from chaos into something resembling stability. Though stability in Dominic's world meant something different than it did for most people. I woke in his bed with January sunlight cutting through windows that overlooked a Chicago transformed by winter, all sharp angles and frozen beauty. The Cartel del Golfo situation had resolved 2 weeks ago with the kind of finality that came from Dominic making it clear that his territory was non-negotiable. I didn't ask for details, didn't need them. The absence of tension in his shoulders told me everything I needed to know. "Coffee's ready," he said from the doorway, already dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt, gold chain catching the light. "Terrace or inside?" "Terrace. I want to see the city." We bundled in coats and blankets, carrying steaming mugs into cold air that bit at exposed skin, but felt cleansing somehow. Chicago spread below us like a promise, messy and beautiful, and mine in ways it hadn't been 3 months ago, when I'd been just a waitress trying to escape an ex-boyfriend's obsession. Tyler tried to come back, Dominic said casually, like he was commenting on the weather instead of dropping information that should have sent panic through my system. When? Last week. Made it to the state border before my people intercepted him. Reminded him of our previous conversation about boundaries and consequences. He sipped his coffee, gaze distant. He won't try again. I should have felt guilt. Should have worried about what reminded him actually meant in Dominic's vocabulary. Instead, I felt nothing but relief so profound it made my eyes sting. Good. No moral crisis? No questioning whether I went too far? You protected me. That's all I need to know. He pulled me against him, and we stood there watching the city wake up. 2 people who'd built something improbable on a foundation of violence and choice. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "Never thought I'd want to build something beyond the business. Beyond territory and power and all the things I inherited from my father. What changed? You walked into my life wearing a waitress uniform and covering bruises you thought no one would notice. And I realized that protecting territory meant nothing if I couldn't protect the people who actually mattered. His arm tightened around my waist. You made me want to be more than what I was supposed to be. I turned in his arms, looked up at the face I'd memorized over these months. The vertical scar on his chin, the dark eyes that saw too much, the jawline that could have been carved from stone. I learned something too, the difference between being controlled and being protected, between someone who fears losing you and someone who fears you being hurt. Tyler's love made me smaller. Yours lets me grow. That's not love. That's respect. Can it be both? He kissed me then, soft and deliberate, a promise wrapped in contact. When we broke apart, the city looked different somehow. Brighter, more forgiving, like it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. My phone buzzed with a text from my newest client, asking about mock-ups I'd promised for Friday. 2 weeks ago, I'd officially launched Mitchell Design. Just me, a laptop, and the portfolio I'd built over 3 months of late nights and coffee-fueled creativity. Dominic had offered to invest, to set me up in an office with equipment and resources I couldn't dream of affording. I'd declined everything except his connections to people who actually needed my services. Independence matters, I'd told him. I need to know I can do this on my own. You can, but accepting help doesn't make it less yours. I'll accept the clients. That's help enough. The compromise felt right, taking advantage of his network without becoming dependent on his money. 3 paying clients so far, with 2 more consultations scheduled for next week. It wasn't stable income yet, but it was mine in ways Vincenzo's never could be. Speaking of which, I had a shift tonight. 3 evenings a week now instead of 5 full days, the reduction negotiated last month when Robert had looked at my request and simply nodded, like he'd been expecting it. You're wasting talent here, he'd said. Go build something. Around noon, Vanessa texted asking if she could stop by. I met her at a coffee shop halfway between Dominic's property and my apartment, the one I still technically maintained but rarely stayed in anymore. She arrived looking skeptical, arms crossed in that particular way that meant she'd been building arguments all morning. So, she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from me, you're living with him now. Most of the time. I still have my place. For appearance's sake? For choice. So I remember I can leave if I need to. I wrapped my hands around my latte, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. I know how this looks. Believe me, I know. But Vanessa, I'm happy. Genuinely, surprisingly happy. With a man who kills people for a living. With a man who treats me like an equal instead of a possession. Who encourages my work instead of belittling it. Who gives me space to breathe instead of demanding I suffocate beside him. I met her eyes, needing her to understand. Tyler called it love while making me smaller. Dominic doesn't call it anything, but he makes me bigger. That's the difference. She sighed, resistance crumbling. I just don't want you hurt. Again. I know. But I'm not some damsel who stumbled into this blind. I made a choice with open eyes. Maybe it's the wrong one. Maybe it'll end badly. But right now, in this moment, it's exactly where I want to be. Then I'm happy for you. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. But if he ever treats you the way Tyler did, you call me immediately. No excuses, no rationalizations. Deal, deal. That evening, I dressed for my shift in jeans and the burgundy sweater that had become my favorite. Pulled my hair into a ponytail that made me look younger than 25. The routine was familiar now. The drive to Vincenzo's with one of Dominic's men following at a discreet distance, the transition from his world to mine, the way I could compartmentalize the violence I knew existed from the normalcy of taking orders and delivering plates. The restaurant was moderately busy for a Tuesday in January. Tourists escaping the cold, locals celebrating occasions or just craving good Italian food. I moved through my tables with practiced efficiency, found comfort in the mindlessness of it, the way waitressing let my brain rest while my hands worked. And there he was, like clockwork, like destiny. Dominic Lombardi settling onto his usual bar stool, third from the left, positioned where he could watch the entrance and the dining room simultaneously. He caught my eye across the restaurant, gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement. But everything had changed since that first night 6 months ago when I'd been invisible, and he'd been just another customer whose attention I'd rather avoid. Now when our gazes met, I saw knowledge there, the intimacy of shared danger, of choices made together, of futures being built from impossible foundations. I finished serving my section, cashed out my tips, changed out of my uniform in the staff bathroom. When I emerged, Dominic was waiting near the door, jacket on, keys in hand, looking exactly like what he was. Dangerous and devoted in equal measure. "Ready?" he asked. "Always." We walked out into the January cold together, his hand finding the small of my back, guiding me toward the SUV that had become as familiar as his bedroom, as his morning coffee ritual, as the way he said my name. In the car, with Chicago sliding past the windows and heat blasting from the vents, I thought about the girl I'd been 3 months ago, terrified, trapped, unable to see a way forward that didn't involve constantly looking over my shoulder. I thought about Tyler's 47 calls, about the bruises on my arm, about standing in a restaurant while my ex-boyfriend dragged me toward a bathroom and everyone watched until someone finally intervened. And I thought about the man beside me who'd stepped into that chaos not because he had to, but because he'd decided I was worth protecting, who'd offered me safety without demanding I surrender my autonomy, who'd somehow made me feel seen for the first time in years. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked, glancing over as we merged onto the highway. "How we started. Violence and restraining orders and men who wouldn't take no for an answer. Not the most romantic origin story. No, but it's ours, and I wouldn't change it. The attack brought me to you. The danger made you notice me. Everything terrible led to this." I reached over, laced my fingers through his. "That has to mean something. It means we built something real out of circumstances that should have broken us. That's worth more than easy ever could be." Back at his property, we shed coats and shoes, fell into evening rituals that had become comfortable through repetition. I worked on client mock-ups while he handled business calls in his study, the soundtrack of our separate lives running parallel. Later, we'd make dinner together. His pasta, my salad, the kind of domesticity that felt surreal given what I knew about his day job. "I love you," I said, apropos of nothing, while chopping tomatoes at his kitchen counter. The words had been building for weeks, pressing against my throat until they couldn't stay contained anymore. He went still at the stove, wooden spoon suspended over boiling water. Then he set it down carefully, crossed to me, cupped my face in both hands. "I love you. Have since you stood in that courthouse and told the judge exactly what Tyler did without minimizing or apologizing. You were magnificent. I was terrified. You were strong. There's a difference." We kissed surrounded by the smell of garlic and basil, and it felt like a beginning instead of a continuation. Like we'd been building toward this moment through months of careful construction, laying foundation stones one honest conversation at a time. Later, lying in bed with his arm around me and darkness pressing against the windows, I realized I'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting this to collapse under the weight of its own impossibility. Instead, I'd started believing in futures, plural, not singular, in choices made daily instead of once, in love that came with complications, but also with clarity. "Thank you," I whispered into the darkness. "For what? For seeing me when I was invisible, for protecting me without possessing me, for making me believe I deserved more than I'd settled for." His arms tightened around me. "You deserved everything. I just made sure you knew it." Outside, Chicago glittered in the cold January night, a city full of violence and beauty, danger and possibility. And somewhere in its complicated heart, a shy waitress and a crime boss had found something neither expected, but both chose to keep. That choice made all the difference. Chicago glittered like glass held to the sun. Hard, beautiful, honest. She had mistaken control for devotion once. Now she could tell the difference by how freely she breathed. Love didn't shrink her. It made room. Whatever came was still a choice, and she was done apologizing for taking up space in her own life.